today it is, I think, investor attention turning back to the macro with the surprising news that Switzerland in particular, I mean, there's a lot of news flow around a lot of countries here, but the standout here is Switzerland. The fact that this country was initially seen as one of the countries that would see favorable treatment from the United States. They might be one of the first to ink a trade deal, and here they are sitting with a 39% tariff. So let's get straight to that story. U.S. President Donald Trump has updated tariff rates for a swath of countries, ramping up trade barriers with some of America's closest trading allies. Canada has been slapped with a 35% levy. Switzerland, as I mentioned, Switzerland's rate is now 39%, while Taiwan faces a 20% duty. Trump had previously announced India would be hit with a 25% rate. All of the newly unveiled tariff rates come into effect from August 7th. Now, Mexico has been granted a 90-day extension as negotiators continue trade talks. Let's take a look at some of the markets and how we're reacting to the news. You've got dollar trading higher versus the Swiss franc. So we are seeing a bit of a sell-off in the Swissy this morning. Dollar up about 18 bips versus the Swiss franc. You are also seeing a little bit, well, actually not a huge amount of movement in dollar versus the Canadian dollar or dollar versus the Mexican peso. Well, let's dive into the Swiss story because I think from an equity market perspective, this is going to be the most significant news. The Swiss government says it remains in contact with U.S. officials and will analyze the situation and decide on how to proceed. Let's get out to Carolin, who joins us now with more on this surprising news. Carolin, I don't think investors were bracing for a 39% tariff rate. If anything, when April 2nd came round, many were thinking Switzerland could be spared, certainly would end up better off than many of its peers. Not the case.
No, you're absolutely right here, Juliana. This is a massive shock for Switzerland, and this couldn't come at a worse time because today is Switzerland's National Day. Today should be a day of jubilation, of celebration, of backyard barbecues and fireworks, but today really is a day of sorrow if these tariffs do go through at 39%. If you cast your eyes back to April 1st, April 2nd, when we got the 31% rate, that was a big shock. I had the trade negotiator on a panel that day. She was utterly shocked and surprised because the two countries had a really good trade relationship. Yes, of course, there is a trade deficit, and that is a sizable one. But of course, this is a small open economy. 60% of the exports, they do go to the U.S. And 60%, a large part goes to the U.S., 60% of that is pharma. And that, Juliana, that seems to be the sticking point this morning because just this week, Donald Trump had sent a letter to 17 pharma companies, including the big ones, of course, Roche and Novartis, and gave them an ultimatum saying that you need to lower your drug prices by September 29th. And there's speculation in the Swiss media this morning that this exact letter may be the reason why there hasn't been a trade deal and why Switzerland may now be a subject to these higher tariffs worth 39%. So in that letter, Donald Trump saying you need to lower your drug prices by September 29th. In his election campaign, he had promised to lower drug prices for Americans by between 50 to 80%. Now, U.S. consumers facing some of the biggest drug prices in the world. Donald Trump has promised to lower them, but that would make a business for some of these Swiss pharma companies extremely or a lot less lucrative in the United States. Remember, you and I, we spoke to the CEO of Roche last week. I put that question to him. Are you going to lower those drug prices? What does it mean in terms of your ability to innovate and your ability to generate profits? But he said that, of course, we're going to do everything to make it work in the U.S. We're in a very good position. The likes of Roche, they have a huge manufacturing footprint in the U.S., and they actually have been on this charm offensive, investing another $50 billion in the U.S. So there is hope from the pharma industry that the worst can be averted. It doesn't quite look like that this morning.
And I want to get to the economic consequences for Switzerland because it was just recently the IMF had slightly upgraded their forecast for Switzerland to 1.3%, but with significant risk that if there were to be more tariffs forthcoming, we could see a decline, in fact, shaving about 0.2 to 0.3% off the growth rate for this year, so somewhat significant as 10% in terms of the tariff rate was the expectation, not the 39% that's landed today. What does it mean for the central bank in terms of some of the ammunition we could see the Swiss central bank rely on?
That's an excellent point. Obviously, Switzerland has dodged a recession, hasn't even been close to a recession. Yes, there has been weakness, specifically in the export-oriented sectors like manufacturing. Of course, we all know that the luxury sector hasn't been doing so well. What it means for the S&B, of course, it is now at 0%. There has been plenty of speculation because of the strength of the Swissy, which has risen another 10% against the US dollar since the start of the year, that they may have to go into negative territory. And that may be forthcoming at its next meeting in September. No one loves negative interest rates. The S&P said so itself. It hates it. There are very, very serious consequences for savers, for the banking industry here. So that's not an avenue that the S&P necessarily does wants to walk down. However, if it needs to prop up the economy as a result of this tariff shock, well, then that is one of the least terrible options. I will say, we all know this, that this tariff deadline of August 7th is not unlikely to be the final one. So there is some room for negotiation. Obviously, there's not going to be a whole lot of negotiations today because the federal council members will be out and about in the country. They'll be holding speeches today. But again, a very somber day for Switzerland.